Hello, my name is Mordred Viking, and I am super excited to bring you this. This is a pre-release copy of Stellaris Utopia given to me very, very kindly by Paradox, so thank you so much for that, guys. And I've been playing a little bit of this over the weekend to try and get to grips with the different mechanics and how things have changed. And I've got to say that this is probably the best Paradox expansion that's been released thus far of any game. Like, the amount of work they've done in this is phenomenal, and it's improved the game on so many different levels. It really is very, very good. So, without further ado, let's jump in. So we are going to be creating a new empire. We are going to be playing with a random chance of all of our previous creatures coming in. Actually, the Meerkat comparison was my test game, so we're going to take them out because you've never seen them before. But Mord's Horde, Mordred's Monetary Union, Mordred's Magnificent Monarchy, United of Oathsworn, have all been previously. Actually, Stormwind hasn't either, I think. No, I don't think so. So, right, so what's new? Well, we are going to create a new empire, and we're going to start actually playing with some of this stuff. Like, one of the best bits is the new government and ethics system. Like, it is nice. Alright, appearance. So, you will be very happy to hear that we are going to be playing as the army with a state. However, we can mess things around a little bit. So what is the most likely evolution of Prussia? The army with a state. I'm trying to look for something which is warlike, like professional and warlike. That could be. Could be. Anthropods, probably the most likely. Maybe we should just play it safe and go with a human. I mean, I always like going as the Smug Slugs. Smug Slugs is always a really, really good option. I don't think Fungoids would be particularly right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we're just going humanoid, honestly. Yeah, let's go humanoid. I mean, what else do we have here? No, let's go human. Right, so, this species are Prussians. Oh, Prussian. We are Prussians. And Prussian. Next. And our leader names need to be as Germanic as possible. That is not particularly Germanic. Neither is that. Neither is that. Neither is that. Okay, so none of these are particularly Germanic. Those aren't bad. Ah, here we go. These are Dutch. It's closer. Okay, so Mammalian 2 is a certain possibility. Yeah, I like Mammalian 2, so we're going to go with that. And we are the... What would we be? The Kaiserliche Prussian, so the KPN? Kaiserliche Prussian Navy. No, we're going to be the SPN. And you'll see why soon. Right, what are our traits? Is there anything which increases our combat ability? Now, bearing in mind that we're kind of turning the army with a state concept on its head. So we are definitely going to be playing with a strong fleet rather than a strong army, because armies in this are a little bit rubbish because they only fight on planets. We need to have the strongest fleet, which is basically the new evolution of the armies in this setting, because it's in space and that's kind of important. So is there anything here which increases our space stuff? I don't think so. I have a feeling that most of the space stuff is gonna be in the Empire level. Conservationist, resiliency. That's what I mean by having, like, army things. Garrison health and fortification is not a bad idea. Enduring, venerable, no. Conformist is possible. We see consensus are more likely to conform to governing ethics. Charismatic, I mean, everyone likes us. Obviously. Communal, no. Nomadic, no. Strong. Increases mineral production, also increases army damage. I mean, that's possible. Quick learners. Talented. Adaptive would be useful. Actually, you know what? I think we're going to go with industrious, because that makes the most sense. And we're going to take some negatives, and I'm going to see if we can grab natural engineers. That's basically the ability to make weaponry. And we are very good at making weaponry. So what is less likely for us? We're definitely not weak. We are probably sedentary, actually. Like, we haven't really moved outside of Germany. We're going to go sedentary. Then we're going to use that point on getting natural engineers. I think that looks about right. So we're industrious, so we generate more minerals, which we need for building ships. We're sedentary, because we've never moved away. And we are excellent engineers. That sounds very German. Starting ruler will be... Wilhelm. No. Frederick. And the ruler title... Oh, male. Ruler title is Kaiser. Heir title doesn't really have one. Phenotype. Probably that. In what room? Something suitably imperial. I quite like the one with the columns. No. I actually like the hologram one, because that's kind of like planning and tactics and stuff. Hairstyle. I like that. Clothes. It's a uniform. It's definitely going to be some kind of uniform. I like the blue one. Blue uniform. That'll do. That looks too hippie. Not hippie. Oh, what are they called? Yuppie. No facial hair. I think it's going to be this. There we go. That'll do. I mean, these are just all the different colours. There, that'll do. Okay, name and class. Homeworld name is going to be Berlin. Star name is going to be Prussia. And we are going to be... I think we're just going to be continental, honestly. So continental is totally fine. Continental preference means that tropical and ocean have the highest. So it's always within the class. So you're either like dry, wet, or frozen. The level doesn't matter so much. Although this is going to mean that you like the desert and Arctic more. Desert 20, Arctic. Nope, that was totally wrong. Ocean 80, continental and tropical. So it only really matters within these. So yeah, we're just going to go continental. I mean, that's basically what Germany is. It's oddly enough on the continent. And what are our cities going to look like? I mean, I like the look of the fungoid ones. They just look really cool. But I think we need something a little more functional. So we're just going to stick with mammalian. Right, we are definitely an imperial government. Now, this is where things change. And I should actually go through and explain this a little bit more. Basically, you have a lot more control on precisely how your government functions. So your government, as you can see here on the right, have traits, essentially like your race do. And you can pick and mix these traits to create your government. The traits that are available are unlocked through your ethics. And some of these have also changed quite radically. So militarism, for example, increases your army damage and your fire rate. So fire rate is basically how fast your ships shoot. So it increases damage that way. And then the army damage is when you're on planets, that's how much damage you do with that. So we're going to basically be fanatic militarists. That is just the way that we are. But there are also some other options. So let's go through those first of all. So the fanatic ones basically just boost the amount you have. It also affects the policies that you have. And these ethics also change the starting policies. And policies, I think, are a little bit more important in this. So the policies are like whether you can resettle people, whether you purge people, whether you have limited or full orbital bombardment, that type of thing. So being a fanatic militarist means that we can use the full orbital bombardment. Other ethics cannot. So that's kind of unique to the fanatic militarists. And we have reduced war demand costs, which means we can get more out of wars. That is totally Prussia. So yeah, that makes sense. Xenophobe. Xenophobes are... they hate other races. So they can purge, they can displace, they can enslave. They have a decreased opinion of other species. They cannot give aliens full citizenship, full military service, and they cannot allow refugees. Their border range, however, is increased, and their rivalry influence gain is increased. So the more rivals that you have, the more influence you generate, particularly as a xenophobe, and that is increased even further with a fanatic xenophobe. Now, one of the special things that you can do as a fanatic xenophobe, and we'll select this now, this is something we are not doing because it has far too many similarities to another certain group of hated people. Where is it? Why am I not seeing you? Should be under... Oh, need to be militarist as well. So if you are fanatic xenophobes and militarists, then you can become fanatic purifiers, which comes with a whole host of additional abilities. But like I said, this is flying a little bit too close to the sun, particularly for a German nation. But these guys cannot engage in diplomacy with other species. Xenopops will always be purged and have no effect on tradition cost. You gain unity from actually purging other populations, and you can use the Armageddon bombardment stance, where you're just basically blowing stuff out of the water. However, your fire rate is increased by 33%, your army damage is also increased by 33%. So this is all-out war. War, 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 and nothing but war. But like I said, for political reasons, we're not doing that. And we're not Nazi Germany. To be frank, we are not Nazi Germany. We are Prussia. So we're not taking that. But it's cool that it's there. So if you want to play some crazy horde which goes and wipes everyone out, go for it. You totally can do that. Okay, so egalitarian. Faction influence gain and consumer goods cost. So these are two new concepts in the game. And they've taken away the individualism and... what are they called? It's now materialist versus... Yeah, that's always been the same. So it's now egalitarian versus authoritarian rather than individualist versus communal. And these matter a lot for your government picks. So if you are fanatic authoritarian, you can't be a democracy, but you can be the other three. If you're an egalitarian, however, you can only be a democracy, or you can be oligarchic if you are egalitarian rather than fanatic. So what do these things mean? Faction influence gain. What are factions? Well, factions were in the previous Stellaris. They were just really kind of rubbish, and you didn't have much impact on them. Factions have been massively overhauled, and we'll certainly go into more detail in the game itself talking about the factions. But basically, factions can also be positive. They're not always rebel factions. They can be loyalists. They can totally be having your back. They do, however, have an agenda. So, for example, in my test game, I had a group of... I had a faction who wanted me to not join a federation. So they were really happy when I was just going it alone. They had a massive boost. And factions basically determine the base happiness of any of their members. So if your faction really likes you, that base happiness is not going to stick at 50%. It can actually go up. And if it goes up above 60%, then that faction actually starts generating influence for you. And influence is like the political capital that you have. And that's what you use to found new colonies. It's what you use to raise new leaders. And all that good stuff. So you can use factions to really positive effect, and that's generally what you want to do as an egalitarian nation. Consumer goods is how happy you are keeping your people, and consumer goods are a cost in minerals every day. So if you have a consumer goods cost reduction, that means you are having to spend less minerals on keeping your people happy. So some which is obviously probably going to be quite useful for keeping your factions on your side. So if you're having a very oppressive state and you don't really care about your people very much, then you won't be paying much in consumer goods anyway. But if you have a very egalitarian, very socialist state, then consumer goods will rise in cost and importance quite dramatically. So that is why you need the consumer goods reduction there. So you cannot use autocratic government forms, and allows utopian living standards. So the living standards level is basically how many consumer goods you provide other people, and things like environmentalists also reduce consumer goods costs. So it's actually quite possible to reduce that quite a lot. I mean, 40%. You can start the game with 40% off your consumer goods. Materialists, these are pretty much unchanged, except that it's now a general research speed rather than increasing physics, social, and engineering. It's now just over everything, and it's 5%. And also it reduces the robot maintenance cost. I don't actually know what that does because I haven't done anything with robots. And you can use full AI rights, which I think just means you can go totally AI. Now, one of the cool things with that is you can actually start the game with robots. So if you have the... Oops, that's not the one... Mechanist civic pick, that basically means that you start the game with 4 of your population being robots, and you have the ability to build more robots. So you can be, from the very, very start, focus very heavily on robotics and using robots instead. And likewise, slavery has also been quite dramatically overhauled, and that is where the syncretic evolution comes in. But we'll talk about that in a bit, because the authoritarians care a bit more about slavery. Pacifists. Pacifists are no longer the diplomats. they've actually made the xenophiles the diplomatic choice rather than the pacifist choice. Pacifists are instead more about internal stability. So you get more monthly unity, more on that in a minute, and also more core sector systems. It is actually much more possible to change the number of core systems you have. So the more core sector systems you have, the less sectors that you need to create. And some factions want you to have lots of sectors. Some factions don't. They want you to be as centralized as possible. And actually one of my strongest factions in my test game were all about being very, very centralized. And they loved the fact that I had tons and tons of core sectors. So that is important for the pacifists. You can get more of those. And then the unity. Basically what they've done is introduced if you've played Europa Universalis IV, they're essentially idea groups that you can unlock and go through, which are traditions, they're called in this. And you spend unity on getting these traditions. So if you have a very small, very compact civilization, you're probably going to get a lot of these traditions. And the more bloated, the bigger your empire becomes. It's changed by the total number of colonies you have. The more expensive they get, and kind of the more unwieldy and the less specialized you can become. And there are a couple of traditions, like the expansionist one, which reduces the penalty for having lots of colonies, but that's kind of a choice you have to make. So if you want to have loads and loads of traditions, pacifist. So you, like I said, it's all internal affairs. It's making yourself as efficient as possible is the pacifist stance here. However, you are limited in the number of wars that you can actually declare. So you cannot use the unrestricted wars policy, which means you cannot just declare war on someone for no reason. You have to have essentially a CB. Or if you're a fanatic pacifist, you cannot declare war on someone, full stop. You can only fight defensive wars. So only if someone actually comes in and picks on you. Xenophiles. This is the new diplomatic choice. So if you want to be creating federations, for example, you will probably want to be a xenophile. Trust growth. One of the changes in a previous expansion, I forget which one, Leviathans maybe, introduced the concept of growth. Introduce the concept of trust, whereby if you have non-aggression pacts or defensive pacts or other agreements like that, that dictates how they respond to you diplomatically. So if you have a non-aggression pact with someone for a long time, their trust of you increases, and thereby their relations with you increase, and so they are more likely to enter into a defensive pact, or later on even enter your federation. So if you want to go the more diplomatic route, then you need to go xenophile. And likewise, diplomatic influence cost is it costs influence points to maintain things like non-aggression pact. No, I think non-aggression pacts are actually free, but it does cost points to maintain things like defensive pacts, and certainly federations can get very expensive indeed. So if you want to reduce that cost, xenophile is the way you want to go. However, to be a xenophile, your species want more stuff. You have an increased opinion bonus with other species. You cannot use full native interference, so you can't meddle with the what they call primitive species quite so much, and you cannot not accept refugees. Authoritarian. Authoritarian is how centralized, I mean technically, how centralized power is under one person. For this, it is your slavery. This is kind of oppressive versus nice. If you're an authoritarian state, you are allowed the caste system species policy, and I love this policy. It is actually really, really interesting. Basically what that does is it automatically switches your populations around depending on what they are doing. So if they are gathering minerals or if they are farming, they are considered slaves, and that is important because of the slave unrest penalty. If, however, they're doing research or gathering energy or in a building of some kind, then they are a regular citizen, and then the citizen rules apply. So consumer goods and that type of thing applies to your citizens, but not to your slaves, because you don't care. You're not providing them with consumer goods. Are you crazy? They don't need luxuries. However, any modifiers that you have for slavery do affect those slaves working as slaves in the fields or in the mines. So it is a very interesting choice if you want to have a more slave-centric nation. Actually, this is what I was playing as in my test game, and I really like the system. I didn't ever used to use slaves, but now they're actually kind of cool mechanic. Like, I'm never going to endorse slavery, of course, but I had like the slaver guilds, which increases the food output and the mineral output. That gels really nicely with the caste system. It just does, because it increases their productivity by 10% plus whatever other bonuses slaves would have. And then fanatic authoritarian just takes that even further. And then the resettlement cost is basically your ability to move populations from other worlds around. So if you just conquered someone, for example, you don't want them all congregating into one place because it's hard to control. You want them spread out, and you probably want those new guys to act as your slaves so that your actual people can be working in the power stations and the research stuff. So you just have a little bit more choice there. And then finally, spiritualists. I don't know why they don't just call this psionics, but if you're a spiritualist, you can get the psionic stuff. You can also build the temple, and you must use AI outlords, so you can't use any robots if you're a spiritualist. However, your unrest is reduced, more on that in a minute, and your governing ethics attraction is increased, so people are more likely to use your ethics, which is useful for the factions, because generally the positive factions will have the same ethics that you have, or at least have the same priorities and the same wants and desires as your main government template. And it is possible, for the first time since Stellaris has been released, to change these ethics as you are playing. So if you're quite a small, quite elitist society and you take over a massive empire in some crazy war, they could actually change your ethics depending on their desires, like just sheer population versus yours. Your ethics will change, and it is entirely possible for these ethics to change as you are playing the game. But if you kind of want a more streamlined, a more homogeneous system, then spiritualist is the choice for you. So unrest is now how they deal with rebels. The higher the unrest, the more likely a rebellion is to take place. Now, I've actually been playing where I've had no unrest, basically, because you can reduce unrest by having big armies. And I generally have big armies on my planets, and it's fairly easy to just boost the number of defense forces or defense garrisons on a planet to counter unrest. But once your planets grow to a certain size, or if you're a particularly oppressive ruler, then that can be a problem. And likewise, you can use consumer goods to offset unrest. So oppressive empires might have a problem with it. The more egalitarian ones probably won't. So I would assume that a egalitarian spiritualist might be a fairly weak choice. And actually, that's the first weak choice that's come to mind. It's actually fairly hard making your decisions in this, because I used to just go militarist, materialist. It was by far the strongest pick. It probably isn't anymore. And then finally, you will notice that there is a new one in the middle. It is the hive mind, and this completely changes the way the game works. You will notice, for instance, the civics. They have an entire set of civics for themselves, and they can still pick 2 of them, and we'll go through those in a moment. So hive minds must use the hive mind authority. Only they can use it. The hive mind rulers are immortal. They live forever. Hive mind pops are not affected by happiness and will not join factions. Completely irrelevant. Everyone's happy. Everyone loves being part of the hive mind. However, non-hive-minded populations, i.e. if you conquer another planet and they have populations, they cannot survive in a hive-mind empire. You have to purge them. They will die. Likewise, you can't use an AI because you can't hive-mind with an AI. Nor can you follow psionic or synthetic ascension paths. So, ascension paths are essentially capstone choices you make once you've reached the end of a tradition tree. So, for example, if you're taking the expansion tradition tree, once you have all 5 points invested in that, you then get an ascension path, I guess it's called, yeah. Excuse me. Which give you even bigger bonuses, and they are really cool in how you can customize your empire. Once we're actually in the game, then we can go through that in a little bit more detail. And then the hive minds have their own abilities like research time, consumer goods cost, though why you would need that, I'm not sure, because happiness isn't a problem. Monthly unity, useful. Core sectors, really cool. Army damage, etc. And if you don't have that, then you have all of these choices. So let's go through them. Police state, reduced unrest. Environmentalist, reduced consumer goods. I'm just going to go through these. I'm not particularly going to read them. If you want to pause the video and see exactly what they say, then I would suggest that is probably the best way of doing it. Otherwise, we will be here forever, and I'm aware that I don't want this episode going too long. I mean, this is all just going to be the setup today, I think, and the next couple of videos will be the actual playing. And there are a couple of really, really interesting ones. I do quite like that Philosopher King. Your ruler starts out as a better level. As far as I can tell, like if you're a democracy, then whenever you elect a new ruler, they will start with +2 levels. So you can have some really, really strong people in charge. Inward perfection, unity and happiness if you're a xenophobic pacifist. A xenophobic pacifist. Interesting. Wouldn't even have considered that being possible, but apparently it is. Fire rate, yeah, that's probably the strongest one. But you have to be a militarist of some kind. Like, many of these have requirements, and many of them don't. Oh, there is an empire generation. Must be oligarchic, and you must be some kind of egalitarian. Okay. I was always wondering if there was possible to get that. Now, this is actually surprisingly strong. Agrarian, idle. Usually the only source of unity are your central buildings. Excuse me. So basically, when you start a new colony, you have the colony administration center or whatever it's called. That's usually where you get your unity from. You can massively increase the amount of unity you generate by building farms if you are some degree of pacifist and are not authoritarian or fanatic authoritarian. So that combined with pacifist, where you get a bonus to unity anyway, means that you are going to have a boatload of traditions, and as a result you can have a boatload of ascendance perks. Those things are strong. They are really strong. Faction influence gain, interesting. Like, I haven't really played too much with the positive factions. Despite what I've been saying, I generally just try to keep them happy. But I can certainly see there would be big advantages to doing that. Aristocratic elite's quite good. Governor recruitment cost. I tend to have a lot of governors, so that might well be a useful one. And then the fanatic purifiers there. So, what are we doing as Prussia? We are definitely fanatic militarists. And I think, fanatic militarist and probably materialist? Maybe authoritarian. We don't really do slaves, though. I mean, we want to be imperial. And I'll talk more about those in a minute. I'm thinking it probably will be materialist. Yeah, I think we're going to go materialist. So, what are the authorities? The authority is essentially how you pick your ruler. So if you're a democracy, you have an election every 10 years. If you're an oligarchy, you have it every 40 to 50 years. If you're a dictator, you have a new election whenever the previous one dies. Or if you're imperial, you have an heir who comes into power after that. Cool. What else are we picking? Well, we are definitely choosing Distinguished Admiralty for the fire rate. We definitely want that. And then technocracy gives you the research. No. Warrior culture. I mean, yes, this makes the most sense. I just don't think is a very strong choice. Cutthroat politics is super helpful because having more influence means you can get more colonies and be more expansionist. Mining guilds might also be good. Efficient bureaucracy might be good. Nationalistic zeal, potentially. Functional architecture would be good. Oh, you know what? I might go with aristocratic elite. Empire leader capacity. That means that we'll have a very well run empire. You know what? We're going to go with that. I like this. Okay. Empire name. Space Prussia. Because I am super original. Space Prussian. Alright, marvellous. And then what's our flag? I don't know. I have not actually looked through these. What is it usually? It's the eagle. I don't know if they have any eagle ones. I mean, we could pick... I quite like this one because it's kind of has a crown in it. And crowns are awesome. We could also do this. It's a little bit more militaristic. That could actually make more sense. Oh, no. Here we go. I think we'll go with this one. Does Prussia have the double-headed eagle? Or is that Russia? I have a feeling that's Russia. Let me just check. You can see this on my videos. Hold on a second. Just loading it up. It is a single-headed eagle. I mean, you could do that one, but that's a little bit too stylized for my taste. What else is there? No. As much as I love that one, no. Kind of a stylized head, I guess. No, I think we're going to go with the double-headed eagle. I mean, I think the Holy Roman Empire had it. We'll just pretend the second head's not there. It's fine. Then we want... Oh, I don't think we can change the colour of the main bit. Primary should be silver. No, it should be like that colour. Right? Yeah, it's a black eagle on a white background. I think that's as close as we're going to get, because I don't think you can change the colour of the icons. Which is unfortunate. I mean, that looks a bit cooler. Oh, we can change the outline too. Kind of like that one. This is the best. I think we're going to go with this. That looks fine. So this is Space Prussia anyway. This isn't Prussia. And what weapons are we using? I'm going to say projectiles because we stand in lines and shoot at people generally. Plus I quite like those. Now, FTL method. I am a huge fan of wormholes. Generally, I really like wormholes. I'm tempted by hyperspace because it's a little... You know what? We're going to go hyperspace. It's more strategic. And that kind of fits the Prussian mentality. And then finally... yeah, we'll just stay with mammalian. Okay, so we are Space Prussia. The army with a state. And if you wish to see how these guys do in the wide world of Stellaris, then I do hope you will join me for the next one where we actually start playing. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope that you are enjoying this series so far and that you are as excited about Utopia as I am, because, man, I cannot wait to get really stuck into this. I really do hope that you'll join me next time. If you have enjoyed this, then do hit that like button. If you haven't done so already, then do consider subscribing. It really does help the channel out. And if you have any tips or advice for me, then do let me know in the comments. And likewise, if you have any questions that you want me to answer, or if you want me to go into any more detail into any of the various features and things, again, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.